Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And at a time when every effort to revive a popular movie, TV show, or franchise is viewed with reservation, and rightfully so, it is worth celebrating when someone gets it right. And in the vast and chaotic pop culture landscape that we live in, King of the Hill was one of those shows that always felt ripe for a revival. After running for 13 seasons and formally ending in 2009, the show was held in a uniquely high regard. Compared to many other shows from that era, it has aged a lot better than most, setting a high bar for a particular style of comedy and adult animation that few have come close to achieving. Depending on how old you are when you first watched the show, you might find yourself appreciating certain characters, themes, and jokes more than before. It really is a testament to the talent and brilliance of Mike Judge and Greg Daniels. So, when a revival of the show was formally announced, not many were surprised. Personally, I let myself get excited, something I usually avoid when it comes to revivals. After seeing some teases, as well as the new intro sequence, I was genuinely confident in this updated vision for King of the Hill. Compared to most shows, it had a lot more going for it. The series finale ended in a way that felt both sentimental and open-ended. And given how much the world has changed since 2009, there was a lot to work with in terms of plot, comedy, and character development. Bringing this show into the present day didn't just feel like a gimmick, it honestly felt right. On top of that, Judge and Daniels were behind this effort. Much of the surviving cast was returning as well. This wasn't a case where a new creative team was coming in and trying to replicate the creative spirit of the show. Nearly everyone involved already had that spirit. It was just a matter of fitting it into a more contemporary context. And to that end, I can confidently say that the revival of King of the Hill succeeded. Having binged every episode of the new season and taking some time to process it, I'm not too surprised that it works, but I'm astonished that it works as well as it does. And at a time when major studios constantly pursue nostalgia-fueled revivals, that is worth celebrating. It's also worth scrutinizing, because it offers some critical insights in how to do a revival correctly. In the first few minutes of the first episode, we get a clear and concise tone for how this season will unfold. It provides some exposition, but doesn't recap everything that unfolded in the 13 seasons that came before it. The show's creators trust the audience to remember who these characters are and where they were when the show ended. But even if you've never watched King of the Hill, that same first episode offers just enough to understand what's going on while setting just the right tone. We meet Hank Hale in the bathroom of an airplane, struggling to fully empty his bladder. But it's not presented as fodder for generic toilet humor. Hank has a narrow urethra, which his wife Peggy is all too eager to explain to total strangers. It's not the first, second, or 10th joke about his urethra, but it sets/resets the comedic tone for King of the Hill. It's embarrassing, yes. It's also funny in a way that's distinct. But most importantly, it carries over a small but critical detail from the original series. For a revival, those details matter a great deal. It shows that everyone involved knows those details and they're going to honor them in this revival. But it's the bigger details of the revival that really lay the foundation. The reason why Hank and Peggy were on a plane to begin with is that they're returning home to Arlen, Texas. They've been away for 8 years, having moved to Saudi Arabia so that Hank could work a lucrative propane job to earn his retirement nest egg. Over the course of this episode and much of the season, we learned that this experience had a profound impact on them. Aramco, the Saudi company that Hank worked for, effectively recreated a stereotypical American town for its foreign employees. It was like a time capsule of sorts, ensuring that Hank and Peggy were effectively insulated from a changing world. So, when they do return to Arlen, they encounter a world that was nothing like the one they remembered. The shops are different, the bathrooms at local restaurants are different, even the lanes of the roads are different. Those differences might seem minor on the surface, but Hank Hill has always been very conservative, both in terms of his politics and his perspectives. He's often against significant change, especially when it pushes him out of his comfort zone. Peggy is similar in that regard, because change is difficult for her, especially if it conflicts with her inflated ego and immense insecurities. It's a strange yet fitting setup. Hank and Peggy are coming home, literally and figuratively for the audience. But the world they're coming back to is so different that it's jarring. It also reflects how the audience feels, returning back to something that they remember so fondly. But they quickly find out that not all the changes they experience are negative, and many of the things that really do matter to them remain the same. Hank's neighbors, Bill, Dale, and Boomhauer, are still present, but in terms of how they're doing, that's actually somewhat mixed. Dale is still Dale. Despite briefly being elected mayor during the COVID-19 pandemic and stepping down shortly after, he's the same chain-smoking nutcase we know and love. Boomhauer still walks and talks like the Boomhauer we remember. The only difference is now that he's settled down with a woman who we never formally meet. He's also trying to play the part of stepfather to her son, Luke Jr. As for Bill, well, he did undergo some change, but in the least surprising way possible. Between Hank and Peggy moving away and the pandemic lockdowns, he really let himself go. And considering he was never in great shape to begin with, that's an accomplishment. But with the Hills returning, Bill finally has a reason to leave his house. He's still pathetic, he's still hopelessly obsessed with Peggy, but he's also as funny and dense as we remember. It helps ensure that the dynamic between Hank and the guys is still the same. The revival doesn't attempt to deconstruct or reinvent anything that's foundational to King of the Hill. It just changes the times and the surroundings. That's important in ensuring that, regardless of how much the world around them has changed, every character, plot, and theme still feels like King of the Hill. But in the same way that this show keeps certain details the same, it also allows for major change where it's needed. And that effort is best reflected in Bobby Hill. If this revival was ever going to work, it had to let Bobby grow up in a meaningful way. And that's a daunting task on multiple levels. For so many years, Bobby was this lovable kid who constantly clashed with his father's worldview. It provided fodder for much of the show's comedy. And Hank's famous line, "That boy ain't right," wasn't just a good catchphrase, it perfectly reflected a generational divide between father and son. But after an 8-year time skip, Bobby can't be that lovable kid anymore. If he didn't change much in that time, then that's a problem. He'd be a young man still acting like a kid, which is more concerning than it is comedic. But if he changes too much, then he wouldn't feel like the Bobby Hill we grew to love. For me personally, that was my biggest concern about this revival. Bobby was and still is my favorite character of this show. He has so many limitations. He's not the least bit athletic, he's not exceptionally smart, but what he lacks in those areas, he more than makes up for with charisma, personality, and overall likability. Changing that lovable kid into an adult was bound to be the biggest challenge facing this show. But the revival found a way to succeed. And it did so by effectively building on what happened in the series finale. The episode, To Sirloin with Love, was so impactful because it marked a major milestone for Hank and Bobby. After 13 seasons of failing to connect, they finally found something they could share in through their mutual love of quality food. Bobby demonstrated an uncanny knack for analyzing meat, which perfectly complemented Hank's love of grilling. Beyond just making for an emotionally satisfying finale, it showed that Bobby had a passion for something, not unlike Hank's passion for propane and propane accessories. Flash forward 8 years, and Bobby hasn't just grown up. He's channeled that passion into a full-fledged career, working as a head chef at a Japanese-German fusion restaurant in Dallas. It's unique, it's creative, it's not at all traditional, but it fits Bobby Hill perfectly. It's so easy to imagine a younger version of him pursuing a career like this. It's also easy to imagine him facing a host of challenges in this pursuit. That does play out in multiple episodes, but there's never a sense that Bobby regrets this endeavor, even when it requires hard work, a fair amount of frustration, and accusations of cultural appropriation on multiple fronts. He's still doing what he loves, and it's easy to cheer him on. That is a change that even the most dogmatic King of the Hill fans can get behind, because it's true to the character we grew to love, and it's satisfying to see him succeed like this professionally. It's also satisfying to see him succeed on other fronts. In the original series, Bobby was always good with girls. Now, as a confident young man in his early 20s who actually knows what he wants to do with himself, he attracts plenty of attention from women, and he responds in kind. He's not a full-fledged ladies' man on the level of Boomhauer or John Redcorn, but it is easy to see why women are drawn to him. It actually fits Bobby's persona, and it fits into a larger world that has significantly changed. That same world has had other effects on familiar characters. Connie, who often functioned as Bobby's friend and love interest, struggles with that world more than she lets on. She, as well as Joseph to a lesser extent, are still trying to find their place in the same way Bobby has. But like so many other young people their age, they really do struggle. Connie really does think she can still be the good, studious daughters her parents molded, right down to dating Chain Wasanasan, the boy they kept trying to set her up with. She even attempts to make it work by embracing ethical non-monogamy, which just comes off as an excuse to remain unattached. But by the end of the season, it's clear that this was just the best way Connie knew to navigate a situation. It also doesn't help that Chang really hasn't changed that much from the insufferable he was before. I would even go so far as to say he's become as amoral as Buck Strickland. Later on, when we find out what happened with Connie's parents, who ended up getting divorced while pretending to still be together, her behavior is even more understandable. In trying so hard to navigate all this change, it's easy to overlook when said change just isn't working. Fittingly enough, it's Hank and Peggy who best demonstrate how to manage so much change in a healthy way. Hank may still be stubborn and traditional, but he's not afraid to let his tastes evolve. While working in Saudi Arabia, he actually grew to love soccer, a sport he derided in earlier seasons. And when he's tasked with helping his half-brother Good Hank, he calls out young men who deal with a changing world in unhealthy ways. Even Peggy, whose ego remains as inflated as ever, has moments of introspection. She lets Bill maintain the fantasy that they had been married so that he wouldn't lose his new group of friends. She also reveals how much it bothers her that her son is growing up and has less time for her. And like Hank, she still struggles to find her place in a world where she's now retired. But compared to most everyone around them, Hank and Peggy are not retreating from this evolving world. They're actually not afraid to try new things along the way. It's only when those things clash with their personal perspectives that they start to push back. It probably would have been easy for someone like Hank to become bitter, combative, and angry with how much Arlen changed. It also would have been easy for someone like Peggy to get sucked into unhealthy echo chambers that would have helped her cope with this change. It probably would have been easy for Bobby to become this directionless, stereotypical slacker, given how adverse he had been to work in his youth. And yeah, it probably would have been easy for King of the Hill to become corrupted by toxic politics, either by going woke or becoming annoyingly anti-woke. Both approaches would have divided the audiences while destroying the characters in the process. But this revival never took the easy route. Much like Hank himself, the creators worked hard to deliver something special. What we get isn't just King of the Hill with smartphones and social media. We get a show that doesn't hide from the challenges and nuances of this complicated world. The fact that it's still funny and endearing every step of the way is also a nice bonus. At the end of the day, this King of the Hill revival works because it embraces the changes that are necessary, but it doesn't just change for the sake of changing. The people, the places, and the environment are allowed to grow. They're even allowed to adopt new perspectives along the way. We may not always agree with those perspectives, but through every episode, we find new ways to appreciate these characters that we fondly remember from 15 years ago. And as far as revivals go, this one is pretty dang beautiful, I tell you what. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and stay safe.